What a great day of learning and adding to our toolkit for this work. This session came from a conversation about people that have all of the intention, and they create these plans, and they create these jobs to deal with this work. But then when they have them, they kind of say, well, what does that person do? Is this workshops? Is it something like that? So I thought, what a great way to bring this conference together to give the next applicable and practical steps in DI work. And so I'm going to turn over to our host for this panel discussion, and it is Dr. Beverly Smith.
Good afternoon. I don't know who's responsible for us going on immediately after lunch on a Friday afternoon, but we're going to have a fun conversation, and I hope you will as well. As was introduced, so you have a diversity plan, now what? I need to tell you that I am honored to have an opportunity to participate in this way in this conference. I've had opportunities in the past to present or to be on the planning team. Today, we're going to just have some fun as we go from the why of this diversity stuff and the what of this diversity stuff to the now what, the how and the now what. I have three amazing young women with me today who have agreed to serve on our panel. They all come from different perspectives of this work, which makes it really interesting, and I hope will make it very meaningful for all of you that are joining us this afternoon. So if we can start, we'll just do Therese, Karen, and Amber, if you would just introduce yourselves and just give a snippet of the type of organization that you're working with and your role.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Therese Stevens. I'm the Chief Operations Officer at braceability.com. That means a lot of different things in a lot of different companies, but for us, I focus on overseeing the actual fulfillment of all of the sales orders that come through our e-commerce website and the management of those after the fact. This also includes an element of HR, and I've done a lot of the training and facilitate a lot of the hiring, and that's where the diversity piece has been important for us to pay attention to. I mean, throughout the company, of course, but that's why I have joined the conversation today.
Thank you. Karen?
My name is Karen Rowe. I am with the House of Hope here in Waterloo. We are an organization that works with single moms and women that are aging out of the foster care system and works with them to achieve self-sufficiency. Really excited to be here because there is a lot that needs to be done in this field, and we see the effects of it every single day here. So thank you for having me here today.
Amber.
Hi, I'm Amber Youngblood. I'm the Vice President of Human Resources at Gator Machining and Manufacturing in Independence, Iowa. So I've been in HR quite a while, and I've been at Gator for the last 4 years now. And we are kind of your typical small town manufacturer. So we are trying to, we draw from a lot from our local workforce, but we're trying to draw from a more diverse workforce as well.
As we pull together and develop and implement our diversity plans, we understand that diversity is a way to leverage our organizations to their full potential. So as we visit with our leadership in our organizations and with our employees, we're looking at how to help them understand that critical case for diversity. There's a pretty common strategy or a protocol for how you develop your diversity plan. And as I've worked with organizations over time, basically that same protocol comes to life for those common steps. First one being collecting the data of your organization. And I look at that data collection as determining the current reality of your organization. There are a number of strategies, ways to do that, and we'll be talking with our panelists today about some of the approaches they've taken. But some organizations have to do an affirmative action plan. So that would be one source of getting data, EEOC reports, surveys, study groups, whatever. So we'll be talking about that. The next step, of course, is doing something with the data. So we're putting on our lenses of equity, and then we're looking carefully at that data to see what it's telling us about the organization. Through that step, you'll be identifying or have identified what the strengths of your organizations are, what some of the weaknesses are, and from that, the tough part of attempting to develop your objectives of your plan. One of the things that if you don't do it, it causes great issue is making sure that you juxtapose your diversity plan objectives with the objectives of your organization, because they have to be congruent. If not, you're going to have a serious problem and some serious failures. So understanding that, understanding the actions that you're going to need to take, the measures, and of course the resources. And lastly, the fun part, the challenging part of implementing that plan and moving toward accountability for your organization. As we visited as a panel, we realized that everyone is in different places on the journey, but they're all on the journey, and that's the important piece. So I would like maybe, Therese, if you would talk a little bit about where you are, how you started in terms of collecting data. What strategies did you use?
Sure. Yeah, thank you. When we were preparing and chatting with one another, and you pointed out the importance of data, I kind of got to thinking about that because we are a very data-driven organization. We prioritize data, from everything from marketing to, key performance indicators and performance metrics across our team. And, we fall into the group that we don't have any legal requirement driving us to submit this data somewhere and collect it. And our team is also small enough that, before we all started working from home, I looked out into the office or to the warehouse and could visually see many of the diverse elements. You can't see all of the diversity, but then there was others, that I knew from speaking to these different people. But even with our background in data, I didn't really think about storing this somewhere, or I guess there is, let me just back up a moment and preface this with saying one of the challenges, and one of the things we're going to talk about later, is what keeps you up at night. And one of the things is like knowing how to talk about this, appropriately and respectfully, in a way that doesn't suggest I don't want to do these things, but rather I very much do, and I don't know how, in some cases. And anyway, collecting data on people, I was hesitant to put people in too many buckets that I assigned them to. So one thing I've been thinking about is how to collect this data according to the way that the employee identifies him or herself. Would be something that we want to do. Some things like age and gender, well, not always, age is pretty universal, although maybe some of us would like to edit our age. So that's something I've been thinking about, is formalizing that, because although at this point I can look out among the group and see much of the diversity, or just hold it in my head with 30 employees, I think we need to have a plan for going forward. And anybody that has been hired over the last probably 18 months or so, which truthfully is at least 50% of our workforce, we've had a big expansion, has gone through a hiring process, which is one of the strengths that I think that we have as part of our journey. And through that process, that collects a lot of data. But I don't think we've done a great job of connecting that to the next step of maintaining that data and responding to that data in a sort of concentrated way. It happens somewhat naturally, but I think we need to be more intentional about it. So I'd love to share more about our hiring process, but I don't know if that fits here, or we should let the others speak about their data collection at this point.
Okay. Amber, you've been with your organization for a number of years and seem to have some, as we talk, some structures in place for keeping a pulse on the organization. You want to talk a little bit about how you've collected data about the current reality of your organization?
Sure. So we are a manufacturing company, and we also do hold federal contracts. So we are in the unique position of we do have to collect that data for EEOC and affirmative action purposes. But along with that, I mean, that's just kind of like putting people in buckets, if you will. Probably the more interesting thing that I like to do is I like to go out and talk to the people that are on the floor and that are part of these groups and make sure that we are doing things that actually affect change that help them in their daily positions. So, which of course, again, I know that some of the other sessions today have kind of touched on that. You can't do that if you don't have the trust of your employees and they're not comfortable coming to you and having open conversations with you. So that's been really important to us, is to have conversations with our Black employees, have conversations with our LGBTQ employees. What are they seeing? How can we help them? How can we help facilitate better communication between them and other people in in the organization? Again, we're small town Iowa. I don't have to probably define to anybody in this group what that actually means. I know that's been done in some of those other sessions, but that's the reality that we're living with. So how do we make sure that everybody is able to communicate open and honestly and be their whole authentic person at work? That's what's important to us.
Okay, thank you. Karen, you have a unique situation. You are a nonprofit agency. You want to talk a little bit about your work and how you've collected data around the climate, the organization that led you to putting together a diversity plan.
Yeah, so we can also look around and just see everybody. We are a very small organization. And so that's an easy part of it. But you know, we notice a lot that the people that we're serving, we need to also understand what's happening with them. So we put our plan together in that we want to make sure that we have every different aspect coming in so that we can kind of serve people better, and it can't be just one thought process or from one background or from one spot. So ours really came from looking around and saying, okay, you know, do we have different ethnicities? Do we have different professions and different passions and all of those different things? And how do we incorporate all of that into what we're doing so that we can serve our people to the best of our ability?
Thank you. Did anyone attempt to assess the willingness of your leadership or of your staff to embrace diversity and inclusion, and the willingness of them to take this on as meaningful action?
I can speak to that. In our organization, I feel strongly that nobody objects to these endeavors, but I think that we still have room for someone to come forward and actively and proactively and commit to making an effort toward it, which is probably, I would imagine, not unlike a lot of the people in the audience. If, you know, kind of looking around like, well, nobody's saying we shouldn't be diverse, but perhaps nobody is also making that active effort. And I think that's kind of the position that we are in. And so just maybe putting some more intention behind what we do or don't do, and having some ownership in that. And I think that could make a big difference.
I can also kind of weigh in on this. So I am on our executive team. So that allows me to, I have those conversations. We're meeting on a regular basis and talking about it, particularly this year as things are coming out in other community, in the community as far as what's important. So I have the support of our CEO. I have the support of the other members of our executive team. This is something that we talk about, and we know that we need to do this. I know one of the things that we touched on when we met as our panelist group was we talked a little bit about representation in marketing. And that's one of the things that is really important to me, because you want to work someplace that has people that look like you. So that was one of the things that we really were very conscious of as we kind of built our marketing plans out in the last couple of years, to make sure that we are representing all groups, and we have that in that visual representation in our marketing piece.
Great strategy. Therese or Karen, would you like to share some of the, based on the data that you collected and some of your observations, some of the objectives that you selected to move forward with this year for your diversity plan?
So ours were within our board of directors, and so we had listed out in our 5-year strategic plan, trying to create the diverse board, and so then we have a committee that is dedicated to bringing on new leadership, our nominations committee. So that committee, as it meets, always is looking at all of those objectives. And we have switched from a board that waits for somebody to say, hey, can I come on the board? And then just bringing them on and moving to being very strategic about looking at what it is that we are needing on our board, and then being very thoughtful about going out and asking people to come on with us. So ours has kind of gone from a written out plan that happened, well, I guess got accepted earlier this year, to a very specific group of people that is recruiting to bring them on the board and join the team.
Thank you. Therese?
Sure. This year in particular, our focus was on bringing in people with diverse skill set backgrounds. Our company grew from very entrepreneurial leadership, and we had a lot of people that had a very similar approach to everything that we were doing. And we've made an intentional effort to bring in people that, you know, their career started in an environment that maybe wouldn't be considered entrepreneurial, and that has experience doing things a different way, and have made a proactive effort to bring them on and seek them out, especially in some of these leadership roles, to help us elevate you know, how we go forward in our space. And that can be challenging, because it's easy to get in a group of people that are all really like-minded, you know, whatever it is that drives that, work experience, personal life, you know, whatever the case may be, and kind of all sit around and tell each other how right you all are. Like, oh yes, this is a great idea, and here's why. And that doesn't really further what you're trying to do, as much as maybe bringing in people with different perspectives. So, you know, that was just one area that's maybe a little bit of a different approach toward diversity. It's the skill set and the experience. And one thing that has allowed us to do that is this transition to so much remote work. We have always been a very tech-focused business, so it was relatively easy for the local staff to go remote. But many of the people that we have hired over the last 8 months have been through different parts of the country. We pursued a few international candidates as well, and kind of still have some on the radar. But by broadening out and being aware that you can make it work with a heavily remote team or a partially remote team, which is in and of itself a new type of diversity to consider. It's allowed us to reach different candidates with different backgrounds, professionally and personally and otherwise.
I'd like to talk a little bit about the role of the individual in the organization who is in charge of diversity and inclusion. And typically it's one person or a small team of people. And typically they stay in that role for a number of years and build their work around their personality, their skills, their passion. I think there may be someone in the audience who has seen that individual leave the organization, and when they leave, they take with them the diversity plan. They take with them the passion, they take with them the accountability, they take with them the detail. How do you make sure in your roles that the work that you do is sustainable with or without you? And they say, we don't know. Who wants to go?
I think you probably have to make sure that it's written down. I mean, I obviously all of the things that I'm working on, maybe working those through in my head. That's great. But you're right. Who comes after? What happens if I leave tomorrow or get, win the lottery or something like that and don't come back? So I think it's really inherent on whoever is leading that initiative to make sure that they're bringing someone up with them, and working with other members of their team. It can't be the passion project of one person. It really has to be, it's a group effort, whether it's your executive team, whether it's your management team, whether it's your HR team, whether it's your marketing team. It's got to be a group effort so that it's just kind of baked, it ends up being baked into your organization. Maybe when you're starting out as an early stage, it is one person, but as you kind of develop that and you build it and you're doing more with it, really make sure that you're bringing in more people onto that team so that it's not just, I leave tomorrow and it just dies.
Jump onto what Amber said right there. I think that is the fear of a lot of different things. So if I'm the only one that's really passionate about something, it's only going to go so far. But if you don't build the team around you that is equally as passionate and understands the vision and is really bought into it, you're never really going to have it. So I think in anything that you're doing or leading, if it's that important, then you bring the people around you that also care about it and understand it and will work towards it, because nothing that is good and real can ever be just one person that does it. And it has to be what you live and breathe, and everything around it has to become part of the culture of the company that you're with.
Has anyone published, have any of you published or put together a pamphlet or something of that nature, sharing information around your diversity plans? Are you there yet? That's always a way to, put it in, as Amber said, put it in writing. I think over time, one of the things I learned most is best is that over communication is the key in any of your work, but particularly in diversity, because everyone needs to know what's happening, how they can get involved, what the culture is of the organization. And people come to your organizations every day, and they can come and go home and not yet understand what your organization believes in regarding diversity. So that's a responsibility, that's a challenge that I would throw out there for all of us, to over communicate our belief system around diversity, the beliefs of the organization, and even pushing it a step further, the expectation that everyone in the organization in some way, shape, or form engage in the diversity work, whether they're volunteering for a committee, whether they're just reading the information that's on the employee bulletin board about what's happening, whether they're celebrating a particular diversity-related event, or just knowing who the people are in their organization and what they represent, I think is critical to the work. Along those lines, we talked about, and that would be one way of developing internal partnerships, making sure that everyone has an opportunity to be a part and to be a partner in the work, but also external partnerships. And someone of the panel talked about developing an external partnership. I think with workforce development,
Vocational rehab.
There you go. You want to talk about that?
Sure, yeah. The way that we, kind of met up with the folks from vocational rehab is actually we had posted a job and just on kind of some local job boards, and someone from their organization came to us and said, hey, I think that I've got a candidate or two that might be a good fit for this role, and helped us understand what they do in their organization and some options for how we find out what may need to be done in order to support the employees that use the vocational rehab services. And from there, the conversation just kind of grew naturally and organically. And it was like, hey, now we have this other role that we're hiring for. Do you have anybody that you want to send our way and apply? And, one of the things that struck me is when they identified what they felt like were the accommodations of various, if you get far enough along in the interview process and you can kind of discuss what accommodations would a person need in order to help them fit in your facility physically or otherwise. And the accommodations they asked for were pretty basic stuff that, were barely even a blip in a change in our process to make it work for them. But I thought that was eye-opening because, I imagine there are some people who don't know how to advocate for those. And there's some employers who don't know either how simple it is, when they were like, we need this additional help. And it was like, have an extra iPad. So this person, and it was just kind of like, well, we can do that. So it's just kind of eye-opening to realize that you're just starting to have the conversation. And all of the information that they were able to share with us and the types of candidates that they have and the support they gave those people as they came through the interview process and training and so on. So that has proven to be a good relationship to develop and eye-opening, that just talking to these people, even if you don't have a job opening right now, or even if, it doesn't pan out right away, having that resource to go back to and actively make yourself available and your positions available to the people that use those services can really make a difference.
Karen or Amber, have you had opportunities to develop any other outside partnerships in your work?
Kind of in a different line, we have a program that we do with the women that live here, helping them find employment. So we have made partnerships with local businesses around where we can kind of help them get their foot in the door and work with them. One of the things that we find a lot is people don't stick it out because they feel like they don't fit. It's something that comes back over and over to us, and it's something that we've been working on with this program that we run. And so there are, certain businesses that have really worked hard with us to figure out what are those things where people don't feel that they fit, and having those conversations and, trying to work through some of those. So when we look at our Boost program, that's where the most of our partnerships have come, in that, okay, so this is a different world for you. So how do we make this so it's a safe environment for somebody to come into and make them feel as though, they do fit and they do belong there when they do arrive?
I don't think we can underestimate the work. Amber talked about the marketing piece and making sure that they present in print, on air or whatever, an environment that's inclusive, and making sure that individuals see their work organization as a place where they would be welcomed, where they would not be ostracized. And I think that we can't underestimate that. That seems like a very natural, but if you stop and think about in your own organizations, what efforts do you intentionally make to make sure that anyone would look at your organization and say, hey, that's a place that I would be welcome. That would be a good place for me. So I don't think you can underestimate that. And the other piece of partnerships, which I think is very important, they're doing that. Your other partners are doing that same work too. And they may have resources and support and ideas that they can share with you. So as you team together, you'll be able to open up your organization even more to anyone that might want to consider joining your organization. I got a comment that said if organizational culture doesn't embrace and legitimately value diversity and inclusion, our organizations simply aren't hitting the mark, and that's absolutely true. And with the people here, you almost assume that there's some level of understanding and value of diversity and inclusion, but maybe not. And so you have to continually put the case of diversity and inclusion in front of your organization, in front of your leadership, to make sure that it is valued. And along those lines, I would ask, and we're talking about how we would engage and hold our organizations accountable. So let's talk about that. One of the things that I've talked about in the past with organizations is you've got to have something written down so you can say we did it or we didn't. We did this, this is why we did it, and this was a result. Did we do it or not? Did we make it or not? Where do we need to tweak and change our work to approach the desired outcome that we want from our current reality to that desired outcome? Can you guys talk a little bit about, anyone on the panel can take it, around how does your plan or your efforts hold you personally in your role and your organization accountable within the context of diversity and inclusion?
I would say for me, it's probably a little bit easier just because we do have that affirmative action plan. So that is our plan. I mean, that's kind of the basis of our plan, and we build around the rest of our plan out around that, whether it's interviewing and recruiting, some of our marketing efforts. Are we going to more of those, are we going to specific recruiting fairs? Where are we going and recruiting people from? That plan really helps hold us accountable, and we're measured on it every year. So it's always in front of us. We're always reviewing that data. We can look at who has applied for our positions. We can look at where people are coming from, and then we can kind of increase our efforts in those areas.
I think our team has done a good job of documenting what we do and measuring against, this is the process we follow to make sure. But I don't know that we have done as good as we can about documenting why we're doing it or what we're trying to achieve. Just as an example, up until earlier this year, our team was under 20 employees. So the hiring wasn't as frequent. We didn't go to recruiting fairs and things of that nature. But as an example, we do have it documented, the process that we go through for hiring to remove unintentional bias. And also we are kind of updating our documentation. Like I was saying, we don't have that many employees, but we do have an e-commerce website that reaches a lot of people, and we are making a more proactive effort to have representation of our true customer on there, in a very entrepreneurial fashion, in order to get the models for our products, which are orthopedic braces, knee braces, back braces, that sort of thing. In the very entrepreneurial fashion, we took out an ad on the UNI job board looking for students who were interested to come in for like 45 minutes and model a brace a little bit. Or we would use employees and say, hey, anybody free for the next 20 minutes? Can you do some pictures? But this year, this fall, and in prep for plans into 2021, we've reached out to a number of talent agencies and said we're looking for people that look in these different ways. One of the things that we offer in particular are braces that are plus size. And go up to sizes 6XL, which isn't common in the brace community. So making a more proactive effort to model those braces, have models that are of those sizes and different body types, that would actually be the ones purchasing those, to put that out on there. So anyway, in response to your question, I do think we've done a nice job of documentation from the tactical perspective of what specifically are we going out to do. But I think we need to do more. It's not that it's not happening, it's that it's not documented and reported back on. Which I'm seeing some nods. That's a common thing, both for business, objectives and achievements, and something like this, the diversity, inclusion, and other cultural elements. So I think that's an area where we can certainly improve, because we aren't necessarily held to a standard that we have to report it to anybody on a regular basis, external of our organization. So we need to do more to hold ourselves accountable.
Anyone else from the panel?
I would agree with that. We don't have anybody that we have to answer to, and so that does take some of the responsibility away. So we have a strategic plan in place, and we have a plan to look at that every year and measure, have we gone towards it, have we hit the goals for that year? But it's all an internal motivation. There's no external that says we have to do this, we have to do that. So it really just comes right down to that. I don't know that I would say that there's any personal backlash on there if we don't hit something. It's an internal desire to change the way we're doing things and grow in that.
So I would venture to say that people in this work are pretty much half glass full, right? I think that's who we are. And so as we've talked, as I've met and talked with all of you, and as I work with others, we talk about our successes and the little inroads that you make. Because the whole diversity plan, it can't be, we want it written down, but we know that it can't be written in stone because it's fluid. As your clients change, as your employees change, the plan is going to need to change. As the objectives of your organization changes, the plan is going to have to be flexible and fluid. So we're holding ourselves accountable, and the scales keep moving, and so we have to continue to be flexible as we do our work and judge ourselves in our work. But we usually focus on the cool things that we're doing and things that weren't done before that are being done now. So that's pretty cool. But I need to know, and I just give some thought, because we don't want to give the idea that this is all rosy and everything is going to happen. We make our plan and the organization is healed when it comes to diversity and inclusion, because we all know that it isn't. So I'd like for each of you to just take a few minutes and speak from your experiences around the barriers, the roadblocks, or the challenges that you've had to face in your role in moving forward diversity and inclusion initiatives, and as you put this plan together. What have been some of the barriers, roadblocks, and challenges that you've experienced?
One of the ones that I've experienced is it's really comfortable to reach out to the people that you know. And so when you want to expand and grow, you need people outside of your circle to come in and help and bring those other perspectives. And that's really hard to do. It's a lot easier to call the person that I see once a week and have coffee with and say, okay, who do you know? And now let's just bring them in and move forward. But to find ways out of my circle, find ways out of the reach that we already have is difficult, and half the time we get frustrated and stop because we don't know how.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Karen. It is easier to keep doing what you know, and I think one of the barriers or challenges that we experience, and it's not like it's done and we've checked it off and it's no longer a barrier, it's kind of always a barrier, is just knowing, or maybe it's not knowing how, maybe it's the confidence to start the conversation. Because if we're all, like I was saying before, if you're surrounded by people that, everybody thinks the same and has the same or similar background, you can all sit around and tell each other how right you are. So for someone to bring up and point out and say, hey, maybe we're not doing the best in this area, maybe we're not right, so to speak, in this area, and knowing how to bring that up when it could be uncomfortable, when it could result, you have these fears like it's going to result in everyone being like, no, we're not failing in any way, we're not behind, we're doing great, and just to kind of let that guard down and everyone be like, think about it objectively, even of maybe we aren't as diverse as we could be, and maybe there are uncomfortable things we need to face that we haven't made effort in this way or that way, and to think about that from like a factual and action oriented perspective, and not from a place that we have to harbor on feeling bad about ourselves or punishing ourselves for not having done it before. I mean, if we're behind the 8 ball, which we had been, and there will probably be times in the future where we will be, just addressing that and facing that and saying, what can we do going forward to make it better and to be better?
And I would just say the challenge is sometimes being the voice of one. If you're the only voice out there that has that, or maybe it's a new initiative for your organization, and being that leader, you need to really be willing to step up and put yourself out there. and be loud if you need to be. People don't know what they don't know. They only know from what they've experienced. So sometimes you just need to be pretty persistent in being that outside voice.
One of the things when you said people know from their experience, I think for people who are new in roles like you are currently in, there's also the I would say sins of the diversity fathers. No, there's if people have been engaged and part of a diversity initiative in your organization in the past, and it went south, if it didn't go well, if it was dropped, if it was forgotten, if it wasn't implemented with integrity, it's going to be a little hard to sell to get people in your organization engaged and involved and committed. So that might be something. Actually, it's more pressure on all of us who are in those roles to make sure that our efforts, our work is clean, it's well thought out. We've done all of the pre-work in terms of knowing what our organization really is and what we need to do to move it forward, and the big piece of implementation and accountability. I think those are huge, and it's something that you need to make sure what you're doing right now is going to make the next diversity and inclusion person very happy or very sad. So, okay, the last question I'd like you to respond to is around, and this is a gem question, what keeps you up at night? In your role as a diversity and inclusion person, what keeps you up at night? And I personally, based upon what has been happening in our country and the impact on issues of diversity and inclusion, the thought of some of that spilling into the workplace is more than a notion for me to even imagine. I'd love to hear you share with us what's your nightmare? What keeps you up at night around your work in diversity and inclusion?
I think for me, it's seeking some barometer that we're doing enough, that we're doing the right things. You know, I'm a pretty finite person. It's right or it's wrong. It's enough or it's not. And I don't naturally live in the gray very well. And so I kind of wishing for someone to be like, yes, check, you've done it. And that's just not the way that the diversity and inclusion is. It is fluid, as you said before. And, you know, the thing that's kind of always in the back of my mind is wondering if we're doing enough, and what is the benchmark for saying we've done the right things. And, you know, I think we can have a lot of respect for why we want diversity and inclusion, but, you know, it's hard to know what success looks like and who's the judge of success. And, you know, even for like Amber's organization, where you have to submit numbers or you know, submit paperwork or reports or whatever, like, okay, that could be enough by their standards, but is it enough by your employees' standards or your employer, you know, the organization or the community standards? And so that's something that kind of always swirls in my head. I know that's not, I don't have an active fear right now, you know, based on the climate that there's something like the protests and so on that would get out of hand in our workplace. But I think it's more of like a bigger picture than that. How can we make sure that it doesn't ever get to a situation, people don't feel so hopeless that it does get to that situation where it turns to violence the way it has in some other places.
Thank you. Karen, you're in touch with what I would consider the grassroots, neighborhood grassroots. You want to talk a little bit about what keeps you up at night?
Yeah, it's kind of a combination thing. Glass ceilings and holding people in boxes. I always worry about checking boxes so much that we forget to value the people So sometimes we work so hard on, we want everything to look a certain way. And so we've checked all the boxes to make sure, we've got this many with this many ethnicity or this many with, and somewhere along the lines that we forgot that really what we need is that value that that person has and what they can bring to the table. And so I worry so much about, if it's through our employment program, if we send somebody out and they have just now checked a box and nobody's actually seen what this person really is and can bring to the table, or if we recruit somebody to come on, all of a sudden we stop looking at who that person was and what they really bring to the table, and we start making them check a box so that we have what it was supposed to look like when we wrote it down. So that's what always really gets me deep in my heart there is, what is the real intentionality, and are we really seeing the person and not the picture that we want?
I probably am more along where you're at, Bev. I worry about that spillover as far as what's going on in our communities. Is that going to spill over into our workplace? We have 300 plus employees that I have a lot of concerns about that. Is there going to be some sort of a trigger that's going to set somebody off? That's usually my biggest fear is that. And then, it's not even, it's that, but it's also then, if something happens, how do you get past that? And how do we grow from those experiences and not just let them fester under the surface?
Mm-hmm. Some of those things probably aren't, but could be addressed in your diversity plan in terms of like crises, diversity related crisis plan. That's a possibility. One of the things I have found helpful in my 45 years in messing around with this stuff is sharing resources. And just imagine if every individual who was on this call had a diversity plan that they would be willing to share with others. I think we would come up with something that was pretty incredibly powerful. It would certainly be helpful for some more than others because our organizations are all different. And I know that I've been a little out of the loop, but I know that Grow Cedar Valley or with Gene and Gene's work, Gene Trainer's work, there was some type of clearinghouse or some type of a place to share resources. And that might be something that we would want to, as D&I people, to push for, because that will give you some quick access to some pretty good resources. So you're not reinventing the wheel. So you're looking and sharing experiences with colleagues that would make your work in developing and implementing your diversity plans much more powerful and much more meaningful to your organizations. Do any of you have last comments or words? We're close to 150. I don't see any. How are you preparing for tomorrow? The staff, population, opportunities for new spaces. Anybody have a quick reflection? How are you preparing for your tomorrow? The staff, the population, the opportunities for new spaces. I know all of you are looking at ways to bring a more diverse employment group to the table, employee group to the table. How are you preparing for that? Are there things that you're doing differently as a result of that work?
That's a big question for just a quick minute, but I wanted to just say the person that asked that question also posted another comment when I was talking about my fear of, is it enough? He said, if we change the question, is it enough, to what else needs to be done? How does that influence our work, relationships, programs, communication? And I just wrote back a quick note. I thought that was a good perspective, changing the thought from, is it enough, indicating that at some point it would be enough and the job would be done. But in reality, it's more of a constant conversation of like, what's next and what else? And, so I don't know that we're necessarily doing all of that we need to do to prepare for tomorrow. But I think that was a really good perspective to put on it of how to think about it, to just open up the conversation, to find those answers or at least actions towards the next step.
Absolutely. Diversity work is never done, regardless of what context it's in. It's fluid because we continue to change. I listened to a TED Talk last night, and the presenter was talking about the whole how you prepare for the diversity piece around race, and and how you get yourself to a place where you are would consider yourself not racist, and was saying that it doesn't work that way, because as we change, as society changes, we have to continue to grow. And he said it was kind of like you can't go and get racism taken away. You can't go like to get your tonsils taken out and say, oh, they're gone. Had racism taken away 3 months ago. It doesn't work that way. It's more like he compared it to plaque on your teeth. And you have to continue to have your teeth cleaned, and you have to continue to sharpen the tools and be more aware of where you are and what you're doing and what's happening around you and how you need to respond appropriately, how you become more culturally competent in your work and more culturally aware. Thank you so much. I really appreciated your insight, and I hope that it was helpful to people in the group.
Thank you so much, panel. Thank you, Dr. Smith. And I'd like everybody in the room to join us for our last wrap-up Zoom for this conference. Molly?
Yes, thank you everyone for joining. This concludes our breakout sessions, but as Felicia said, there is a wrap-up, so make sure when we close out of this meeting that you go back to that Whova app and get access to that final wrap-up session. So thank you everyone. This will be recorded, and you will be receiving that in the next couple of days in that Whova app for you to access if for some reason you would like to revisit, had to leave early, came in late, whatever the reason. So thank you everybody, and we'll see you for the wrap-up.